I fell unconscious on a Tuesday afternoon at my desk at Henderson Building Supply. For 23 minutes, medical professionals declared me clinically deceased. When consciousness returned, my entire understanding of existence, suffering, and morality had been fundamentally altered. During that time, Jesus Christ revealed something that filled me with greater terror than death itself. He showed me that countless individuals who identify as Christians, people who attend weekly services, study scripture, and maintain prayer routines, are heading toward eternal separation from God because of one particular transgression they failed to recognize as sinful. It isn't homicide, it isn't stealing, it isn't sexual immorality. It's something far more insidious, far more destructive, and far more prevalent. It's a transgression that masquerades as justice. It presents itself as self-preservation. It even appears virtuous, yet it constructs an invisible barrier around your spirit that will prevent you from entering paradise permanently. My name is Margaret Hollis. I'm 56 years old, have never been married, and until October 9th, 2024, I had no faith in God whatsoever. Not because I pursued atheistic philosophy or examined theological arguments against religion. I simply concluded many years ago that if God were real, He was either indifferent to my suffering or deliberately malevolent. So I abandoned belief, abandoned hope, abandoned any effort toward faith. I served as an administrative assistant at Henderson Building Supply in Terre Haute, Indiana for 21 years. Identical desk, identical equipment, identical daily pattern. Arrive at 7:45, manage telephone communications, handle purchase orders, interact with contractors who became aggressive about shipment delays, consume lunch in solitude in my vehicle, depart at 5:15, return to my vacant department, watch broadcast programming, sleep, repeat, endlessly. Colleagues at work described me as challenging, emotionally distant. One younger woman from the accounting department once remarked that I appeared to have a permanent expression of displeasure fixed on my features. Her assessment was accurate. I maintained constant anger toward circumstances, toward people, but primarily toward one individual I actively refused to acknowledge mentally. That particular Tuesday began identically to thousands before it. I reached the workplace, prepared coffee in the common area, dismissed casual conversation from colleagues, and positioned myself at my workstation. Approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, I experienced unusual constriction in my chest. Then pain arrived, acute, overwhelming pain that traveled down my left arm. I attempted to rise, but my legs became unresponsive. I remember collapsing, detecting someone scream, then complete absence. Dr. Aaron Pembroke, the cardiac specialist at Terre Haute Regional Hospital, subsequently informed me I had experienced a massive myocardial infarction. Medical professionals term it a widowmaker cardiac event. My heart ceased functioning entirely. Emergency medical technicians transported me to the hospital within 11 minutes, but I had already expired. They performed resuscitation attempts for 23 minutes, administered electrical cardioversion 7 times with the defibrillator, injected various medications into my circulatory system, executed chest compressions that fractured 3 ribs. Nothing produced results. Dr. Pembroke instructed one of the nursing staff to prepare documentation for declaring time of death. But then at minute 23, without any medical rationale, my heart spontaneously resumed beating, strong, consistent, normal rhythm. He stated this was medically impossible, that individuals don't recover after such duration without substantial neurological damage. But when they conducted brain function assessments, everything appeared perfect, no impairment, no deficiencies. as if my brain had been safeguarded by something they couldn't quantify or comprehend. Safeguarded, that's a charitable description for what genuinely occurred to me during those 23 minutes, because I wasn't protected. I was challenged, evaluated, completely exposed, and shown the most repulsive truth about myself that I had dedicated 45 years to concealing. The transition occurred instantaneously. One moment, I was collapsing behind my desk at Henderson Building Supply. The subsequent moment, I was positioned in a location that possessed greater reality than any reality I had previously experienced. The atmosphere itself appeared conscious. Everything was more defined, more distinct, more intense than anything on Earth. Colors I had never perceived before. Sounds that penetrated immediately into my spirit. And then I observed him. I required no explanation regarding his identity. I knew instantly, Jesus Christ. But his appearance bore no resemblance to the illustrations in religious educational materials or the artwork in ecclesiastical buildings. His eyes were flame, penetrating, omniscient, holy in a manner that generated a desire to vanish. I collapsed completely to the ground, not through deliberate choice, but because in his presence no alternative posture was conceivable. "Margaret," he said, and when he articulated my name, it encompassed every moment of my 56 years, every thought, every decision, every secret I had concealed. "Why are you here?" "I don't know," I whispered, my face still pressed against whatever constituted ground in that realm. "Stand up," he commanded. When I complied, I observed he was holding something. It appeared to be a chain, a massive, heavy chain constructed from something dark and corroded. And somehow I understood that chain was connected to me. It was emerging from my chest. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. I moved my head negatively, terrified. "This is your unforgiveness," he said. "This is the prison you constructed for yourself, and it has been growing heavier every single day since you were 11 years old." 11 years old. The moment he articulated those words, I knew precisely what he referenced. The memory I had sealed away. The wound I had covered with anger and resentment for 45 years. My father, Robert Hollis, my dad. He departed from our family when I was 11, simply walked out one Thursday morning and never returned. Abandoned my mother, Diane, and me for a woman named Crystal, who was employed at the tire manufacturing facility with him. Didn't explain, didn't express regret, just gone. 1 year later, my mother received a diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She died within 6 months. I was 12 years old and had to relocate to live with the father who had abandoned us. He and Crystal had moved to a small residence on the south side of Terre Haute. I despised every second I spent there. Crystal attempted to be kind to me, but I wouldn't communicate with her. My father attempted to converse with me, but I wouldn't acknowledge him. After 8 months, I informed him I wanted to go live with my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. He didn't resist, so I moved in with Aunt Linda and completed my adolescence in her house. When I was 15, my father was arrested for driving under the influence. He had been consuming alcohol, ran a red light, and crashed into another vehicle. Thank God nobody died, but the other driver sustained serious injuries. My father was sentenced to 6 months in county jail. I remember feeling satisfied when I heard the information, as if he was finally receiving what he deserved. But something transformed him in that jail. A pastor named Reverend Thomas came to visit the inmates every week. My father began attending the Bible studies. He said he gave his life to Christ in that cell, said he repented of everything he had done. When he was released after 6 months, he separated from Crystal. He began attending church. He attempted to contact me. I was 16 by then. He sent letters, tried to telephone, appeared at Aunt Linda's house a few times, said he wanted to make things right, said he was sorry, said God had changed him. I refused to see him, refused to read his letters, instructed Aunt Linda to tell him to never return. I decided right then that I would never forgive him ever, for leaving us, for my mother dying alone without him, for ruining my childhood, for everything. That was 40 years ago. 40 years of carrying that decision like a badge of honor. And now, standing before Jesus with that chain of unforgiveness visible and tangible, I finally understood what I had done to myself, what I had become, the cage I had built with my own hands. Your father tried to reconcile with you 47 times over the years, Jesus said, and suddenly I could see them. Every letter I burned without reading, every phone call I refused, every birthday card I threw away, every time he stood outside Aunt Linda's house hoping I would come to the door. 47 attempts. I had kept count without even realizing it. Each rejection had felt like victory. He died 3 years ago, Jesus continued. Did you know that? I hadn't known. Aunt Linda had mentioned it once, but I changed the subject so rapidly she never brought it up again. I didn't want to know, didn't want to care. My father was dead to me long before he actually died. He prayed for you every single day for 40 years, Jesus said. Every morning by name. He asked me to forgive him for abandoning you. He asked me to help you forgive him. He died hoping that somehow, someday, you would release the hatred. The word hatred hit me like a physical impact. I wanted to protest, to say it wasn't hatred, it was justice. He deserved my rejection. He earned my coldness. I had every right to feel the way I felt. But Jesus was looking at me with those eyes that saw everything, every justification, every rationalization, every lie I told myself. Margaret, do you know what unforgiveness does? He asked. Before I could answer, the environment around us changed completely. We were now standing in what resembled a vast courtroom, but it wasn't like any earthly court. There were records everywhere, books, scrolls, digital displays showing lives in real time, millions of them, billions of them. Every human being who ever lived, their lives documented in perfect detail. Look, Jesus commanded, pointing to a specific record. I saw a woman, maybe 38 years old. She was sitting in a church service, singing worship songs, hands raised, tears streaming down her face. She looked completely devoted, completely sincere. But when Jesus touched the record, I could see deeper. I could see her heart. And inside her heart was a massive tumor of bitterness toward her sister who had betrayed her 15 years ago. She sang about God's love while nursing hatred. She prayed for others while cursing one person in her thoughts every single day. She thinks she has forgiven, Jesus said. She said the words. She even convinced herself she meant them. But watch. He showed me the same woman at home. Her sister had tried to call her to apologize. She let it go to voicemail, deleted it without listening. Her sister sent a letter. She threw it away unopened. Her sister showed up at her door. She pretended not to be home. 22 years of this, Jesus said. A lifetime of religious activity with a heart full of poison. Where is she now? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Jesus didn't speak. He simply showed me. The woman was in a place of absolute darkness. Not physical darkness, spiritual darkness. She was alone, completely, utterly alone. And she was crying out, "But Lord, I went to church. I served in ministry. I gave my offerings." And a voice responded, cold and final, "I never knew you. You say you loved me, but you refused to forgive your sister. And I told you clearly, if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." I felt sick, terrified. "But that's extreme," I said. "One unforgiveness, one grudge, that can't send someone to hell." Jesus turned to me with such sorrow in his eyes. "Margaret, unforgiveness is not a small thing. It is not a minor issue. It is the rejection of the very heart of the gospel. I died to forgive sins, all sins, the worst sins. If you receive my forgiveness but refuse to extend forgiveness to others, you prove you never understood what I did for you. You prove you never truly knew me." He then showed me another person, a man in his 60s, successful businessman, respected in his community, deacon in his church. But there was a brother he hadn't spoken to in 31 years over an inheritance dispute. The brother had tried to reconcile dozens of times. The man refused, said it was about principle, about justice, about what was right. I watched as this man had a stroke at age 68. As he lay dying in the hospital, his brother came to his bedside one final time, begged for forgiveness, begged to make peace. The man turned his head away, refused to speak, died with unforgiveness as his last act on earth. Jesus showed me where that man went. The same darkness, the same isolation, the same eternal separation. And the man was screaming, "But I was a good man. I was honest. I served in church." And a voice responded, cold and final, "I never knew you. You say you loved me, but you refused to forgive your sister. And I told you clearly, if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." "You served in church, but you didn't serve me," the voice responded. "I commanded you to forgive. You refused. You chose your pride over my command. You chose your bitterness over my love. Depart from me. I never knew you." I watched hundreds of these cases, thousands. People who appeared to be model Christians, who did everything right externally, but who carried unforgiveness like a hidden cancer in their souls. Mothers who refused to forgive daughters, sons who rejected fathers, friends who ended friendships over petty offenses, church members who split congregations over personal disputes, all of them convinced they were justified, all of them convinced they had good reasons. "Do you see the pattern?" Jesus asked. I did. Every single one of them had a story, a legitimate hurt, a real betrayal, a genuine offense. They weren't fabricating their pain. They had truly been wronged, but they had chosen to hold on to that wrong, to nurse it, to feed it, to let it grow until it consumed them entirely. Unforgiveness is not about whether the other person deserves forgiveness, Jesus explained. It's about whether you understand what I did for you. You were my enemy. You sinned against me. You rejected me. You deserved eternal separation, but I forgave you while you were still a sinner. I died for you when you hated me, and then I command you to do the same for others, not because they deserve it, but because you have received what you don't deserve. He showed me something else then, a vision of my own life, but not from my perspective, from my Father's perspective. I saw him the night he left, saw the guilt eating him alive even as he walked out the door, saw him with Crystal, trying to build something new, but haunted by what he had destroyed, saw him get the phone call about my mother's cancer, saw him weep alone in his car, knowing she was dying and he had abandoned her, saw the shame that never left him. Then I saw him in that jail cell, saw him broken, defeated, suicidal. Saw Reverend Thomas come in and tell him about a God who forgives the unforgivable. Saw my father fall on his knees and cry out for mercy. Saw the genuine transformation, the real repentance, the true change. I saw every letter he wrote to me, watched him pour his heart out on paper, telling me how sorry he was, how he knew he could never make it right, how he prayed I would give him a chance. I saw him mail each letter with trembling hands, hoping this would be the one I would read. I saw him standing outside Aunt Linda's house in the rain, waiting for hours, hoping I would come outside. I saw him drive away crying when I never did. I saw him show up at my high school graduation, sitting in the back row where I wouldn't see him, just wanting to witness that moment in my life. I saw him at his kitchen table on my 30th birthday, 40th birthday, 50th birthday, with a card he had written but would never send because he knew I would destroy it. And then I saw him 3 years ago, 71 years old, diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, 6 weeks to live. He asked Reverend Thomas to try one more time to contact me. The pastor called Aunt Linda. She told me. I said I didn't care, told her not to mention his name again. I watched my father die in a hospice bed with Reverend Thomas holding his hand. His last words were a prayer. Father, please forgive Margaret. She has every right to hate me. Please don't hold her unforgiveness against her. It's my fault, all my fault. Please save her soul. He died praying for me. The man I had hated for 45 years spent his last breath asking God to forgive me for not forgiving him. The weight of that truth crushed me. I fell to my knees before Jesus, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't know, I cried. I didn't know he had changed. I didn't know he cared. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Jesus said, gently but firmly. You chose not to know. Every time he reached out, you had a choice. You chose unforgiveness. You chose bitterness. You chose to nurse your wound instead of letting me heal it. But he destroyed my childhood, I screamed. He abandoned us. My mother died because of the stress he caused. And I forgave him, Jesus said, completely, fully, forever. When he repented in that jail cell, I washed away every sin, every mistake, every failure. He became new, but you refused to see him as new. You kept him locked in his worst moment. You became his judge, his jury, his jailer, and in doing so, you imprisoned yourself. He touched the chain that was still attached to my chest. This chain connects you to him. You thought holding on to your anger would punish him, but he's free. He's with me now. This chain only binds you. It has been pulling you down, making you bitter, angry, cold, isolated. Everyone who tried to get close to you felt this chain. It pushed them all away. You blamed your father for ruining your life, but you ruined your own life by refusing to forgive him. I looked at the chain and finally saw it clearly. 45 years of accumulated bitterness, resentment, hatred, judgment. It had grown so large, so heavy, that it had become my entire identity. I wasn't Margaret Hollis. I was Margaret Hollis who would never forgive her father. That unforgiveness had defined every relationship, every decision, every moment of my adult life. "Can I be forgiven?" I whispered. "Is it too late?" Jesus looked at me with love that defied description. "It's not too late, but you must choose right now. Will you forgive your father? Not because he deserves it, not because it makes sense, not because the pain wasn't real, but because I command it, because I forgave you. Will you release him?" Every fiber of my being wanted to hold on to that anger. It was all I had known for so long. Letting it go felt like betraying myself, like saying what he did was okay, like pretending it didn't matter. But then I understood. Forgiveness wasn't saying it didn't matter. It was saying I wouldn't let it define me anymore. It wasn't pretending the wound wasn't real. It was choosing to let Jesus heal it instead of keeping it infected. It wasn't reconciling with my father. He was already gone. It was freeing myself from the prison I had built. "I forgive him," I said, and the words felt like razor blades coming out of my throat. I forgive Margaret Hollis for abandoning me, for leaving my mother, for everything. I release him. I let it go. The moment I spoke those words, the chain shattered, exploded into dust, and I felt lighter than I had ever felt in my entire life. 45 years of weight gone in an instant. "This is what I offer everyone," Jesus said, "freedom." But most people choose the prison. They think their unforgiveness is justified. They think they have good reasons, and they do. But I don't call you to forgive because the other person deserves it. I call you to forgive because you need to be free. Then I felt the pull, back to my body, back to life. Jesus said one final thing before I left. "Go back and tell them. Tell them unforgiveness is not a minor sin. It's a chain that will drag them to hell. Tell them to forgive, not someday, not when they feel like it, now, today, before it's too late." I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. Dr. Pembroke was shocked I was alive, but I wasn't the same Margaret Hollis who had collapsed at Henderson Building Supply. I was different, changed, free. The first thing I did when I was discharged was go to Green Lawn Cemetery, where my father was buried. I stood at his grave and spoke out loud, "Dad, I forgive you. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I wasted 45 years hating you. I'm sorry I never gave you a chance. I love you, and I'll see you again." Then I went to Cornerstone Baptist Church, where Reverend Thomas still preached. I told him everything. He wept. He baptized me the following Sunday. I gave my life to Jesus Christ, the real Jesus, not the one I had rejected for 56 years, but the one who died to set captives free. If you're reading this, I need you to understand something. Unforgiveness is not a small thing. It's not something you can deal with later. It's not justified just because you were genuinely hurt. Jesus was clear. If you do not forgive, you will not be forgiven. Not because God is mean, but because unforgiveness proves you never understood the gospel. You never understood what He did for you. Who do you need to forgive today? What chain are you carrying? What prison have you built for yourself? Maybe it's a parent who failed you, a spouse who betrayed you, a friend who abandoned you, a church that wounded you, someone who abused you, someone who lied about you, someone who destroyed something precious. You have every right to be angry. The pain is real. The wound is legitimate. I'm not minimizing what they did, but I'm telling you what Jesus showed me. That chain you're carrying will drag you to hell. That unforgiveness you're nursing will cost you eternity. Not because the other person deserves your forgiveness, but because you need to be free. I died for 23 minutes on October 9th, 2024. Jesus showed me that unforgiveness is the hidden sin sending countless people to eternal darkness. People who think they're good Christians, people who go to church, people who have every right to be angry. But rights don't matter in eternity. Only obedience matters, and Jesus commanded us to forgive. Forgive today, not tomorrow, not when you feel like it, today, before your heart stops, before it's too late. Because the prison you think you're building for them is actually a prison you're building for yourself, and Jesus is the only one with the key.